Well, ordinarily on a podcast, you wouldn't need to stand up, but you do need to stand up because at this point, you are going to be introduced to the first lady of sales. Dr. Cindy is here, author of the brand new book, Sell Yourself: How to Create, Live, and Sell a Powerful Personal Brand, and just generally wonderful human being. Cindy McGovern, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, David. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
So tell us a little bit about your professional backstory. How did Dr. Cindy become Dr. Cindy? And what were some of the interesting professional pit stops along the way?
So I was a college professor before I got into consulting and thought that was going to be my life's work. Went to school for a PhD in communication and then went into consulting full time. And about 6 months into it, was pushed into a sales role. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to get fired. I can't do this job. I had this ick factor in my mind about sales. And once I got into that role, I realized I'd actually been selling my entire life. I just didn't call it sales. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, if I don't know this, how do other people not know this? So then that got me into really focusing on sales as my consulting profession. And then, of course, now writing books.
And the first book, the previous book, is Every Job is a Sales Job. Talk to us about that philosophy and what drove you to write book number one.
So that's the book I wish somebody had given me when I was 18. It literally, every job really is a sales job. You are selling all day, every day. Sales is a life skill, not a business skill, let's be honest. And I know you share that philosophy as well. But what's funny is I have 3 degrees in communication. It was never taught what's in that book. And I went to great schools. And I think it's this idea that you learn sales if you go into a sales profession. But every single profession is sales. Every job interview, when you're talking to a potential client, you're selling. So why wouldn't we be teaching that as part of your business skills?
Totally. Well, let's talk about the brand new, shiny, hot off the presses book, Sell Yourself. So Sell Yourself, tell us who it's written for and walk us through some of the key principles that we can look forward to reading in that book.
So I wrote this book in response to all the changes that have happened in the world in the last couple of years, the Great Resignation, the Great Remorse, then the Great Reset. I believe what's next is the Great Rebrand. And whether you've moved jobs or not, the world around us is different. And people need to recognize the way we sell to one another is different. And yes, I use the S word, but your audience understands that.
Right.
But we really are selling ourselves every day. But we got a little bit not as proactive in the last couple of years. We kind of hold up as a world. And now everything has shifted and we're vying for sort of that distracted attention out there. And I want people to recognize that there is an easier way to be able to sell yourself every day. And so I go through 3 different phases of building a powerful personal brand. And the first one is create that brand with intention, with purpose, make sure it's authentic, all those things. Then you have to live it. And how do you do that day in and day out? And then the third part is, quite frankly, the most important, but it's how you sell that brand. And we say things like sell yourself all day long, but people forget the operative word is sell. So you should probably know how to do that.
What do you think? So let's talk about mindset, because you mentioned obviously coming out of an academic background and then coming out of a consulting background. By the way, I think those 2 professions are probably the most sales averse. Right? So academic, it's like, no, I've got a big brain. I've got big ideas. These ideas should sell themselves. And it's sort of a sheltered world in the academic universe, as you know. And then consulting, it's like, no, I'm a trusted advisor. I'm a professional. Selling is beneath me. I don't need to pitch. I don't need to sell. I don't need to convince people or persuade people. They should just see how awesome and amazing our services are, and they should be lined up around the block. Where does that mindset break down? And then how do you shape or reshape people's thinking to get away from that old mentality?
So it's funny you said that because they expect their services to speak for themselves. So often when you're a subject matter expert, it's like, well, of course, everyone knows I'm super brilliant, right? So of course they know that I'm a great attorney, or I'm a great this, or I'm a great that. What ends up happening is people are afraid of sales because they feel like it's pushy, it's one-sided, it's narcissistic, it's about me. But if you really reframe this, and I'm just going to be blunt, you really reframe it and say, okay, I expect that everybody knows how awesome I am. That's actually the narcissistic side. So it's really, if you have that skill set and you want to help others, you can't help them unless they know what you do and how awesome you are and why you're different than everybody else that does what you do. So you're really offering your services or inviting them to work with you when you're selling, especially in a professional services setting. And if you're not, you're actually not helping anybody because you're relying on the rest of the world to go out there and tell your story for you. And we know how that works. We're all interconnected, but you've got to give me a story to tell in order to be able to share it.
Yes. The other, well, as far as a story to tell and where this intersects with most professional services sellers, they have this other self-soothing delusion that's like, well, no, my business is all built on referral. I just get referrals and referrals come in and I do good work and then those people refer me to me. And I'm guessing this is your philosophy as well. You have totally abdicated your entrepreneurial responsibility to be in the driver's seat of your business. Let's debunk that myth once and for all, Dr. Cindy. What is wrong with my business is built on referrals? I'm okay. I don't need help with sales.
So that is probably the number one thing that I get when I'm coaching and consulting to professional services. Oh, well, we work by referral. No. You like to get referrals. Working by referral means you wouldn't take on a client unless they were referred. My guess is there is still business happening out there and still business development. But what's amazing about referrals is, of course, we all like them because that means somebody else sold for us. But we have to let our clients know that we are taking on more clients. We need to make sure they know how to explain our services to a potential client, a neighbor, a friend, a family member. And we need to make sure they do it right because anybody that's in a professional services setting, in a consulting capacity, a coaching capacity, an attorney capacity, a doctor capacity even, you've gotten a referral and it wasn't the right one. They're like, well, I need a family law and, they send you to a litigator. It's because they don't understand what you do and why it's different. So making sure that your entire network knows how to work for you is key. And that's the sales piece. And that's really what this next book is about, is how you sell yourself, how you tell that story and create that brand that differentiates you from everybody else. So people know you're the family law person, not the litigator. You're the coach that does insurance business, not, something else. But if you don't take that responsibility and recognize that you are, quite frankly, I loved your word, abdicating your entrepreneurial responsibilities. If you're not taking that seriously, you're leaving your wallet and your bottom line in the hands of everyone else. That's just not good business.
Wow, I've never heard it put that way. That is totally brilliant. You are handing your wallet over to someone else. And holy smokes, for sure. Well, I want to dig into some of the core ideas and some of the wake-up calls that are in the Sell Yourself book. Chapter 2 is titled Know What You're Selling. And I'm guessing a lot of people get this wrong because they think they're selling their stuff. And we all love our stuff. We love our methodology, our training, our models, our philosophies, and it's all about inputs. And typically that's really not what we're selling. What are we really selling if we're in this world of personal brand and really working with people who want to buy?
You are truly selling yourself, but there's a piece that happens that people forget. In order for a sale to occur, trust has to happen. You have to cross the trust bridge, and people really kind of confuse rapport and trust. Rapport is I like you. I'll go have a cup of coffee with you. We'll go play tennis, whatever. Trust is I will let you operate on me. I will let you handle my legal issue. I will trust you with my business and my bottom line and coaching me. Nothing is going to happen until that trust piece happens. And that trust is not going to be built on your methodology. That trust is going to be built on you.
Yes, 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 yes. Talk a little bit about what are some practical ways that people have been sort of, sequestered maybe in their own little world, and now they have to go out into the marketplace and they have to communicate this trustworthiness. What are some ways to do that?
Well, the first thing is creating that brand that is truly authentically you. Because if you're reaching too far or you're trying to create a brand that's, I call it too big for you, you're never going to be able to sustain it. So you've got to be the real you. You can grow into a larger brand, absolutely. But in the beginning, be who you are, based on your core values. And then the next piece is you got to think about how you want to tell that story. You have to be clear on what you want people to know about you. And I call them your superpowers in the book, that everybody's got their superpowers. Well, what are yours? What is it that you do that no other attorney does? What is it that you do that no other coach does? What is it that you do that no other, consultant does? How do you tell that story? Facts tell, stories sell. You got to give me a story to tell somebody so that I can send you referrals I can know. And then you've got to devise how you want people to talk about you when you're not in the room. And I really do believe it's your responsibility to control the narrative out in the market. And so it's much like crafting a reputation like a celebrity would do. They know what restaurants they're going to go to, where they're going to be seen, who they're going to be seen with. You have to be quite diligent about your brand and be willing to protect it and defend it. And that's all part of the communication, truthfully. And people don't think about that. They think, oh, I'm going to put out a beautiful link, logo and a website, and I'll do some blogs. No. It's the way you're living the brand. That's actually how you're communicating.
Yes. This reminds me of a story. This was way, way long ago. I was working with a CPA, and I sat down with him and I said, well, really, what separates you from all the other CPAs? Because obviously, getting a CPA designation, that's table stakes, right? That's the entry point. And he says, well, David, let me tell you a story. And of course, those are the magic words, right? Anytime someone's like, well, let me tell you a story. A guy came to me, an entrepreneur, and he was really underwater on his taxes. So he hadn't paid his taxes in a couple of years. He gets this letter from the IRS saying, hey, you owe us like $300,000 in taxes. And he comes to the CPA, he says, I think I'm in some serious trouble. He says, I took this guy. We looked at the last 5 years of his situation. We looked at some of the other investments in real estate, and he had a pretty complex situation. Not only did he not have to pay the $300,000, not only did he avoid going to jail, I got him a $25,000 tax refund.
Oh my God.
And it was like, stop everything, put down the coffee. This is the guy. So in that one little story, it's like, well, you're not like the other CPAs. The other CPAs are like, well, okay, I guess I'll calculate, $300,000 and how many cents do you owe, and I'll submit the tax return. So in that one little story, what did he share? He shared, I'm proactive, I'm analytical, I'm a creative problem solver. I really understand where you're coming from. No matter what kind of trouble you're in, I can probably get you out of it. Tell us about the power of personal stories to your personal brand, and what are some great examples that your clients have had good success with?
Well, you just said the operative verb, which is it's personal. It has to be personal for the person you're speaking to. And so part of really being able to control your own narrative is having some of those, I call them pocket stories. What are the stories that you have in your back pocket when somebody starts talking about, a tax situation, or that they had this problem over here, or their cousin had this issue? You got to have stories at the ready, and they may be very different. We're very multifaceted human beings. Part of your job in selling it, and I talk about this in the book, there's a step to sales. The first step is having a good plan. The second step is looking for the right opportunity. Well, that's the opportunity to tell that story and recognizing this is the guy or gal that needs to hear this story of how I saved them this. But something that you did that was amazing in that is you helped him pull out, I'm proactive, I'm analytical. Most people can't do that for themselves. They call it, well, I just did my job. I'm just doing my job. So something that I talk about in the book and that I work on even with my own clients is you've got to take an honest inventory of how you're seen and the words that people use to describe you, and make sure they're the right ones. Would people say that CPA is analytical and proactive, or would they say he's a good CPA? And making sure you're feeding your network the words you want them to use, because if you're not feeding it to them, they don't know what to say. They don't know those stories. And I'll tell you a quick story about a client of ours. So they were in the insurance space and they prided themselves on service. And I said, well, what is the service that you give? And they're like, oh, it's just better than everybody else. We communicate and we make sure everything is done on time. And I said, but isn't that the job? And they didn't like that very much. and they were like, no, but we do it better. And I'm like, but how do you do it better? If you're literally delivering on what the expectation is, what makes it so much better? And that was such a hard exercise for them because they had just been doing it. And so we pulled out what those nuances are. It was that they sent an email ahead of time, or they made a phone call instead of an email, or when the assistant was booking the appointment for them, it was the way she had the conversation and that they followed up with a text and all these things. That's the customer experience. And so maybe part of, for your listeners, is looking at what the customer experience is that you deliver. And that will help you create those personal stories for your personal brand.
And really flipping it around, not so much what do you do, but what do they get? What do they get? What do they experience? What do they feel, hear, see, and touch when they interact with you or your company?
Well, it's funny that you said see, hear, and touch, because I actually talk about in the book selling to the five senses. So
tell us more about that.
Yes.
I'd love to hear more about that.
So I believe we sell to the five senses, whether we realize that or not. So when someone walks into your office, they're looking, is it clean? Is it appealing? What does it smell like? What is the vibe that they're getting? You know, is the carpet dirty? All those things. And we don't really think about that. We think of that as sort of the marketing package, but that's the sales, because you're selling now whether I want to come back or not. When you walk into a restaurant, if it doesn't smell good, but it's really pretty, you're probably not going to eat there, because smell is one of the most dominant senses when we're consuming food. Well, think about the dominant senses when you're selling to your client base. Physician walks in the room, disheveled, doesn't look organized, hair's a mess, papers everywhere. Kind of don't want you to cut me open, you know? So how do you actually craft your brand for all of those senses? And this is another place where I find that folks in professional services don't pay attention to all of those. They think the most important thing is that they're good at their job. But recognizing that all five of those senses are what makes you good at your job. It's about the impact that has on the customer, the consumer, the patient, the client, and how you do that. So that has to be very carefully crafted. You got to be mindful on how you're selling to all of those senses.
My guess is that when people come to work with you, they have a whole series of decisions that they need to make, right? What do you want your business to stand for? What do you want your brand to be or to signify in your prospect's mind? I have found that most clients and audiences, and maybe you found the same, they find it really tough to make these decisions. And they go, Dr. Cindy, I don't know. And then the reason they don't know when it comes time, hey, is it A or is it B? Is it chocolate? Is it strawberry? They're afraid of leaving money on the table. They're afraid if I decide it's A, I'm giving up on B. If I decide it's strawberry, I'm giving up on chocolate. I'm leaving money on the table. It's FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. How do you encourage people to make these big, bold, strong decisions so their brand can really stand for something?
So that is one of my favorite exercises to do with clients. And I know it is yours as well, because we have to get them to recognize who you actually want to be known as. And I talk about that in the book, about a young lady who is posting on Instagram, basically looking like she wants to be a model, yet on YouTube, she's posting as an investigative, serious journalist. Okay, I don't know how to support this person. I want to support her. And I will support her in either way, but it's confusing to your audience. So they don't know where to categorize you. It's like there's a story in the book about a restaurant. It was called Thai Mex. I didn't know if I wanted Thai food or Mexican, so I never went. So you can't quite we like to compartmentalize as human beings. We like to put you in a little box and say, okay, you're filed over here. You're an author, you're a speaker, you're this, you're that. When you can't get super clear, it actually makes it harder for people to send you referrals because they're not going to sit and give your entire bio that, oh, you work in these 7 industries. You need to pick one, pick a swim lane, make sure it's deep, but pretty narrow because you're going to specialize in that. And, you know, if you're sitting there going, oh, I'm not going to make enough of a living in there, then I'd ask you to look at the industry. But chances are most everybody listening to the podcast is in an industry where there's plenty. There's plenty out there to go get. But you've got to be super clear on how you want to go get it, how you want to be known so that people can go get you. It's like if you look at a soft drink company and then they start making chips, are they known for chips or are they known for soft drinks?
Yes, exactly. Well, I want to talk about this concept of going deep, because even if you convince someone, or you don't convince them, but you help them realize that depth is the way to go, and trying to hedge your bets and be everything to everyone is the path to disaster. The next question, I'm guessing, Dr. Cindy, is, but Dr. Cindy, I'm going to be bored if it's all insurance all the time and I only work with insurance clients, or I only work with veterinarians, or I only work with big giant global corporations. I'm going to get bored. How do you come back to them with that I'm going to be bored objection?
So I think that if you're going into every client and potential client with genuine curiosity, you're never going to be bored, because we should be going into it with a blank slate. And maybe you consulted to 1,200 different insurance agents. This one's still going to be different. It's a different time. It's a different market. They're in a different space. I don't care if you consulted to the company across the street, which we have done that, by the way, where we'll work with somebody and 10 years later, we work with somebody across the street. It's different. So part of the job is to make sure you're keeping your saw sharp in terms of that genuine curiosity, you know, and you and I think are old enough to remember ABC Always Be Closing.
Yes.
I believe in ABC Always Be Curious. So if you are constantly seeking a new way to help them, you're not going to get bored. You start phoning it in, I would tell you maybe it's time to sharpen up the resume.
Yeah, I love that new definition of ABC, always be curious. One of the chapters in the book is, listen, you already know how to sell. You don't need to go and take some, spin selling or some of these big franchise sales trainings that have been around for decades. When you're telling someone, hey, you already know how to sell, what's that definition of sales and selling? And then how do you get them comfortable with, wow, Dr. Cindy, you're right. I already do know how to sell. How do we transfer that confidence to them?
Yeah. So the first thing is, I want everybody to remember we were all 5 years old at one point, and 5-year-olds are the best salespeople on the planet. You were 5, you were singularly focused on getting that cookie or that toy or going outside or whatever it was, and you were not going to let that go. So you are innately in you, there are sales skills. Somewhere along the way, you got told no, you started freaking out over it, whatever. You couched sales in your icky file, right? So we've got to pull that back out of the icky file and recognize that you're never going to be able to help anyone unless you can sell them. And I'm just going to say it again for the listeners. You can't help anyone unless you can sell them. Whether you're a veterinarian, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a CPA, whether you're financial services, does not matter. You have to sell them first. Now, where I know everybody's good at this, though, is if you have ever gotten a client, you sold them successfully. If you ever held a job interview is a sales conversation. If you've ever gotten your teenage child to pick up their shoes off the floor, you're like the best salesperson on the planet, right? So it's recognizing you sell every single day. You just don't call it sales. So take that skill set that you already have that you're very good at and pull it over into your day job. Truly, because you're doing it at night. You're convincing your family to go out to dinner instead of cooking, or going for pizza instead of salads. That's still sales. So pull all of that knowledge you've already got and bring it to the day job.
Yes. Talk to me a little bit, because I know that you speak on this and you write about this. People that you come across that say, Cindy, I just don't have the sales gene. I just don't have the selling DNA. Whatever native gifts these other people got, I was absent that day. I didn't get them. So talk about that sales gene, so to speak.
So that conversation, if you said that to me right now, I'd say, then why are you trying to sell me on the fact that you can't sell?
Whoa, very nice.
Truly, because that's what you're doing. You're trying to sell me on the fact that you can't sell. So I would hold that mirror up to you right then and say, okay, great. So you're doing a sales job right now. Tell me how this is any different.
Yes. Well, and the first sale has to happen in our own heads, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's really, really important.
You wouldn't have hung out a shingle or done this job if you didn't believe you had something to deliver. And I think that's the thing that people forget is you were brave enough to step into the role you're in today. You sold yourself on the fact that you have superpowers to bring to the world. That and giving yourself permission to do that. And maybe you quit a job to start this. Maybe you're an entrepreneur. Maybe you went into leadership in the role that you're in. That was an internal sales job. That is often the hardest one. So if you convinced yourself, you can convince others.
Totally, totally right. So folks are now listening. They're running over to Amazon to buy their copy of Sell Yourself. They come to the realization, oh my gosh, I've been thinking about this the wrong way. I've been doing this the wrong way. I need to rebrand who I am as a professional. Talk about the concept of rebranding and the way that you break it down in the Sell Yourself book.
So I think that's a lot of what's going on right now, truthfully. And that's part of a main reason that I wrote this book is I think we're all rebranding. And I would even say myself included, because the world around us changed in the last few years. So if we're looking at how we sold, and I'm going to use the S word, in 5 years ago, it's very different than how we're selling today. From a marketing standpoint, there's more online, we've got TikTok and all these other things, but also just the way that we communicate with one another. We're not necessarily sitting down face to face with someone. Maybe it's 2D, maybe it's via text. We've got telehealth, we've got all these other things. Each and every interaction is still a sales conversation, but the way you're selling yourself has to change because we sell differently in 2D versus 3D. So that's part of the rebrand. And so part of it is starting that honest inventory of, is the message still out there that you want to be out there? And if it's not producing the results you want, then we need to rebrand. We need to look at how you're going to bring that to the table. Much like a product that had very 1970s packaging, and then all of a sudden it has shiny new packaging. Time for new packaging for yourself. So getting that honest inventory, looking at how you want to be known going forward, looking at who can help you get the word out there. Nobody does this life alone. And then start the process of living that brand. And then trying to control that narrative is the next piece. You're going to have to convince those that knew your old brand that you are now different. And that sometimes is the hardest sell as well. Getting those other folks to say, no, I don't belong in this file anymore. Now I belong in this one.
Yes, for sure. When this rebranding process, I'm guessing, is an inside out, right? First, we have to make these internal decisions, many of which you help people with in your keynotes and your online programs, and obviously in the Sell Yourself book. But there's going to be a temptation out there to go, oh, rebrand. Okay, let me just go change my LinkedIn. Let me just go change the headline on my website. Boom, I'm rebranded. What's wrong with doing it outside in? And what are some symptoms that people that rebranded with this outside in approach, but did not do the internal work first, what are they going to be bumping up against?
The first thing they're going to bump up against is authenticity. Was that really who you meant to be? And is it just that you're putting a shiny new label on the same old thing? And is that going to build distrust with your audience? Because no sale is going to happen without trust. So if I just put a shiny label on it, I'm convincing people it's something else, but it's really not, that's going to create a little bit of a disconnect. So we have to be mindful of that. So the inside happens first also because you've got to understand why you want to do this. Is it time to rebrand and do that inventory for yourself of, okay, this is why I need to rebrand. This is truly where I want to go. A lot of people are kind of getting into a second act, right, of their careers or creating a portfolio career. Why now? And what is it that's going to keep you going? Because the other thing that people mistakenly do is they'll rebrand, and then in a couple of years they rebrand again, and then in a couple of years they rebrand again. You're building distrust with your community because they don't know where to categorize you. It's like the gal in my book. Are you an investigative journalist or are you a supermodel? I want to help you, but I don't know which one.
Quick, funny, and embarrassing story that I'll share is as you're talking about this memory is popping up in my head. So when I first started out, this is 2002, I had some consulting and training background from a corporate standpoint, but not as an entrepreneur. So I sign up with this company, I think they're still around, called 360 Solutions. And it's like, a box of binders arrives at your door and it's now you're an instant trainer. Yay. So I go to this chamber event because I was networking anywhere and everywhere I could. Huge mistake, big mistake. And I met this woman and we strike up a conversation and she asks for my card and I give her my card. And then we meet a couple of years later and I had rebranded the wrong way. And she goes, oh, I remember you. You're David from 360 Directions. Now, it was fascinating to me because I was going in 360 different directions. She forgot that it was 360 Solutions, but in her head, it was a Freudian slip. This is the guy that's going in 360 directions. He doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know who he serves. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's just reaching into the binder and saying, which workshop would you like today? So talk about a little bit, how can we get some direction? What is the North Star? Is it legacy? Is it taking care of our family? Is it a revenue number? What is that big driver, or how can people find their own big driver when they're making these big future decisions?
It's a great question. And I do have an exercise in the book that I take you through. And I want you to think about what that legacy is. Start at the end and work backwards. And whether the legacy is paying for kids' school, getting a building named after you, who knows, right? Everybody's got that driver. And I love the way that you put that. It's the North Star, but it has to be super authentic. And this is part of the exercise too, where people think, oh, well, sure, I want a library named after me. Do you really? Or do you just want to help people? It's okay. Like, I'm not looking for my name to be on a library. I just want to impact people and impact their bottom line. That's what I want to do every day. So creating that brand around a true awareness of where you want the end game to be, and then coming backwards to figure out what those steps are, is the best thing. Now, in that exercise though, David, is also people having to let go of some things that aren't serving them and let go of maybe some of those connections that are no longer serving you, which is really hard. Because if you are truly, think about it, if you're on the water and you're changing direction, you're leaving some things in the wake. You may have to leave some things in the wake, and you got to be ready for that.
Huge, absolutely huge. Because otherwise you're just swirling and going in circles, chasing your tail. I want to go behind the scenes, just two more quick things. One is about your speaking, and it's very interesting. Your first book came out early pandemic, right? Early pandemic. It's like, uh-oh. So talk a little bit about your speaking and how things shifted virtual versus in person. Now that we're post-pandemic, what shifts do you see with your speaking clients about the conferences and the events and the kinds of things that you're being asked to do? But walk us through kind of pandemic and now post-pandemic for speaking.
It was really interesting as a speaker, and this too, the entire world came to a screeching halt, and I had, I don't even know how many booked events. And then of course they either got pushed off, some were pushed until even this year, some were flipped to virtual. I've run a virtual company since I started it. So when the pandemic hit, the running the virtual piece wasn't as big of an issue, but speaking in 2D is, because you don't have the audience there to give you that vibe. And so that was one thing that I had to sort of get used to. And of course, I've been teaching online for years, but a keynote is very, very different than teaching a workshop. So the first thing was really changing and sort of rebranding the way that I was doing keynotes and the way that I was doing public speaking. And, as a former college professor of public speaking, you have to look at all the things, look at the audience, look at the medium, look at how the interaction is going to be. Are they going to use the chat box? Are they not? So that was the first thing. And then now coming out of this and getting back to in-person events, and I'm sure you've seen this too, what I'm seeing at the larger events is there's still a virtual component. They're simulcasting somewhere, or you're on this. So it's also recognizing that, yes, you're in front of 500 people in this particular room, but you're also in 1,000 offices in 2D. So how do you deliver that message and making sure that it translates appropriately for each of those mediums, for each of those audience members? So it's been interesting. And I don't think virtual is going to go away. I really think it's here to stay. You can reach a larger audience. But again, it's how the message is delivered and being mindful of how you're going to show up for the member.
Absolutely. Last question about the Empire is, tell us a little bit about your academy, your online learning portal, and sort of where that has been and where that is going.
So Orange Leaf Academy was something that I actually came up with about 14 years ago and didn't ever get to that point, but the pandemic pushed us into online learning. So a lot more people are more open to it. And so it's a way for us to reach more people and impact more people. So it's our online learning offerings of what we would do in our workshops. And so we have multiple courses that are available to folks, salespeople and non-salespeople. I'm using air quotes over here. We're about to launch another course for them, and on personal branding, we'll be launching early next year. But my goal is to reach more people, to help them shorten their sales cycle and grow their business. And that's what the Academy lives for. That's the entire purpose of the Academy. Reach more people, grow your business, shorten the sales cycle, have a little more fun in the process.
And right now, are those digital only, or is it digital and like a cohort live led component, or Q&A calls, or any access or interaction with you at this point?
There is. So we have either office hours for the courses, or you go through as a cohort, and it depends on which course you're in at the time. With the Art of Selling course, we actually do cohorts. And so there are 3 live group coaching calls. Platform is open 24/7 to ask questions. It's monitored, so there's interaction there as well. But then we also have sort of office hours for some of the courses where it's a Q&A. You come online, you ask the questions of your coach, whatever it is that you need at that moment, because we really want people to be able to take the learning and apply it. And we're all humans. If we're being totally honest, I can watch a video, but I might not do anything with it. So we want to make sure they get an opportunity to ask those questions of how they actually apply the information in their world so that they can have success.
Awesome. So final 2 questions as we're wrapping up. The final question is, where can people get connected and stay connected to more Dr. Cindy brilliance? But before we get there, if folks were to take one overarching idea from the sell yourself philosophy, or from any of what we talked about today, what would you hope that one big takeaway idea would be for them?
You have a brand already, whether you realize it or not. You better make sure it's on purpose, and it's your responsibility to make sure that's true.
Amen. Mic drop moment right there for sure. Now, how can people get connected and stay connected to more Dr. Cindy brilliance? Where can we send people? What resources can we give them? And where are all the goodies connected to the new book?
Absolutely. So drcindy.com, drcindy.com is the speaker page. You can go to Orange Leaf Academy, Orange Leaf Consulting. But the new goodies for the book are at sellyourselfbook.com. There's a resource vault on there. So you can, get all kinds of wonderful, fun things when you get the book. And my goal is, again, to help people to impact their bottom line, shorten their sales cycle, have a little more fun in the process.
Awesome. Well, all of those links are going to be directly under this episode at thesellingshow.com. Dr. Cindy, you're such a rock star. Thank you for all this value that you shared with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to talk to you.